Elias Thorne made a living photographing what people forgot to look at. He never expected the forgotten to look back. When he finds a map charting the seconds humanity has misplaced, Elias steps into a city built from absence and learns that time is a currency, and time always collects its debt. The Map of Missing Seconds, that's our title for today's story. Elias Thorne didn't photograph people. People were messy. They lied with their eyes and posed with their chins. Elias photographed silence. He was a liminal hunter. He spent his nights in the gut of the city, capturing the hollow beauty of laundromats at 3 a.m. and the eerie stillness of hospital corridors after the lights dimmed to a sickly fluorescent hum. On a Tuesday that felt like a recycled version of Monday, the rain in Seattle turned jagged. Seeking shelter, Elias ducked into an alleyway off 4th Avenue. There, wedged between a dumpster and a brick wall, was a door. It was painted a shade of blue that shouldn't exist, a blue that felt like the bottom of the ocean. There was no sign, just a faint smell of ozone and wet wool. Inside, the shop was a graveyard of things that didn't belong anywhere else. Broken compasses that pointed up instead of north. Glass jars filled with what looked like gray smoke. Behind a counter made of driftwood sat a woman. She was knitting a sweater that seemed to be made of shadows. The needles clicked like bone on bone. "I'm looking for something lonely," Elias said. It was his standard icebreaker. "Loneliness is easy, Mr. Thorne. I have shelves of it. But you're..." She reached beneath the counter and pulled out a leather-bound tube. And Elias opened it, his breath hitched. It was a map of Seattle, but the geography was a fever dream. Districts he'd lived in for years were replaced by names like the District of Forgotten Scents and the Boulevard of Broken Clocks. "This is a map of the missing seconds," he whispered, her needles finally stopping. "Every time you've ever blinked and felt like you missed a moment. Every second you've lost to you. They all go somewhere. This is the way there." Elias followed the map. It led him to a cul-de-sac in the suburbs that, according to his GPS, was currently occupied by a massive concrete overpass. Yet, here he was, standing on a pristine asphalt street lined with identical white houses. The sun was the most unsettling part. It sat perfectly still, at the horizon, casting shadows that were too long, too dark, no rustle of leaves. Even the air felt thinner, like it hadn't been breathed in a century. He entered the house marked on the map, the House of Echoes. The door wasn't locked. Inside, the house was a hollow shell, but it wasn't empty. Every square inch of the walls, the ceiling, the floors, the windows was covered in yellowing sticky notes. Elias peeled one off. It read, 12:04 p.m., October 1994. "The moment I realized I didn't want to be a doctor." Last night, the word sorry that stayed in my throat. He realized with a jolt of horror that these weren't just random notes. These were the lost seconds of everyone in the world. This was the cosmic junk drawer of human existence. He raised his camera, his finger trembling. Click. In the viewfinder, the hallway looked different. In the corner of the frame, there was a figure, tall, spindly, with limbs like charred branches. It was standing perfectly still. Elias pulled the camera away from his face. The hallway was empty. He looked through the lens again. The figure had moved 3 feet closer. It had no face, only a surface that looked like a television screen playing static. The map shifted in his hands. The ink bled and reorganized itself. The suburban street began to stretch. The houses grew taller, their windows narrowing into slits. Elias ran. He didn't know where he was going, but the map guided him toward the center of the gap. He found himself standing before the Cathedral of Static. It was a structure built of billions of old cathode ray tube televisions. They were all stacked like bricks, soaring hundreds of feet into the pale yellow sky. Every single screen was flickering with gray and white snow. As Elias walked through the arched entrance, the sound was deafening. It wasn't just white noise, it was the sound of a billion voices all whispering at once, every conversation that was ever cut, every phone call that dropped, every secret whispered into a pillow. He saw the Shadow Man again, not one but dozens. They were librarians of this place. They moved with a stuttering, frame-by-frame motion like a lagging video. One of them reached out a static-filled hand. Elias felt a coldness. Suddenly, his own memories began to flicker. He saw his 5th birthday. He saw his first camera. But the images were fading, turning into gray snow. "You aren't supposed to be here." A voice echoed not from a person, but from the televisions. "You are a seeker. Now you will be the loneliest thing of all. You will be a missing second." Elias realized the trap. The woman in the shop hadn't sold him a map, she had used him as a reboot. The gaps needed new memories to keep the static from fading away. His legs felt heavy, like they were turning into lead. He looked down at his hands, they were starting to pixelate at the edges. He was becoming part of the environment. "Think of something real," he screamed to himself. But it was hard. The cathedral was screaming at him, showing him every regret he'd ever had. It showed him he called back, the father he hadn't visited in years, the city he lived in but never truly looked at. He reached into his pocket and he felt the sharp edge of his apartment key. It was a physical anchor. He gripped it so hard his palm bled. The pain was sharp. The pain was real. "I, Elias Thorne," he gasped. "I am 32 years old. I hate the smell of wet wool." He turned and ran back toward the suburbs. The shadow men moved to block him, their static faces screaming with the sound of 1,000 disconnected modems. He didn't look through his camera lens anymore. He knew that looking at them gave them power. He kept his eyes fixed on the blue light of the exit on the map. The ground beneath him began to crumble into digital dust. He leaped across a chasm filled with discarded memories and felt the cold air of Seattle hit his face. Elias woke up face down on the sidewalk. His camera bag was soaked. His body ached. He looked around. He was back in the alleyway off 4th Avenue. There was no blue door, no antique shop. Just a brick wall covered in post no bill signs. He reached into his bag. His camera was there, but the lens was cracked. But tucked into the battery compartment was a small, yellow sticky note. It wasn't in his handwriting. It was in the handwriting of this woman from the shop. It read 3 through 14 p.m. the second you almost gave up. I'll keep this one for the collection. See you soon, Elias. Elias looked at his watch. It was 3:15 p.m. He had been gone for hours, yet only 1 second had passed in the real world. He walked out of the alley, but he didn't take any pictures. He didn't want to see what was hiding in the gaps ever again. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe, share, like, and comment. See you on the next episode.